Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of The Family Business by Kimberly Mullins, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Prologue. The door splintered and boards flew toward all parts of the room, one hitting her on the shoulder. The police entered, guns drawn, and aimed at the only person in the room. Freeze! One of the officers shouted. She disregarded the request, picked up her whiskey, and drank it quickly. She could feel the pain radiating down her arm. Do you need something, boys? You're being taken in for violating the Volstead Act, he told her. He waved to one of his men to take her into custody. Part 1, Chapter 1. Chicago, 1896. The young man gathered up his books and tied them with a string. Running steps sounded on the wood floors of the foyer, and small hands yanked on his jacket. He looked down and saw a small face with dark hair falling in the little boy's eyes. Benji, what's up? He asked the boy. Can I tag along with you, Patrick? Patrick kneeled in front of the boy and pushed his hair off his forehead. I thought you were going to hang out here today. Benji cocked his head toward the sitting room and sighed. They're fighting again. Patrick listened to the girls in the next room and acknowledged the observation. Yeah, they don't get along, do they? Like oil and water, is what Emma says, said Benji, crossing his arms over his chest, mimicking Emma's stance. Yeah, Patrick laughingly agreed. He thought about his errands. He enjoyed the boys' company and understood his wish to get away from the fighting. I'm going to the library. Want to come with me? Benji nodded his head up and down. Yes, please. He ran back into the sitting room to get his jacket and hat, and then returned to Patrick and took his hand. Go tell them you'll be with me, Patrick said. No, the boy muttered, scuffing his feet. I don't wanna. I'll go with you, Patrick offered. Will that work? Yeah, I guess. The two walked in the two walked to the sitting room. Opening the door, Patrick yelled into the room, Hey! Benji buried his head in Patrick's leg. The two girls stopped screaming at each other and turned slowly toward him. He held up his hands. Don't start on me. Well, what is it? Lottie asked her brother, ready to get back to her fight. I'm taking Benji with me. Jemma spoke up. Have fun. She turned back and grabbed Lottie's hair. Lottie did the same, and their fighting resumed. Patrick looked at Benji. They both shrugged and headed out the door. Thanks. Benji looked at his hero. I'm here whenever you need me, said Patrick, ruffing up the small boy's hair. Me too, he grinned. Chapter 2. Chicago, 1918. Ben, John's looking for you, Clay said as he stood next to the table. Ben didn't look over at the man. Thanks. He put down his cards and pushed his chair back. Groans sounded across the table. Don't fold, ordered a man across from him. Yeah, let's finish the game, complained another. The stakes were high and the money was piled in the middle of the table. Well, if you want to tell John that, Ben said, starting to pick up his cards again. I'll stay with you if you want me to let him know it was you. The two men looked at one another and then back at him. The first man stuttered, No, you go, we're fine. Ben stood up and, with his back to the men, he grinned at Clay. They walked to John's office. Clay went in to tell him Ben was there and came out a few moments later. You can go in now. Patrick walked by Clay and, as he reached for the doorknob, said, Stay away from Jemma. I don't know what you're talking about. I know about Edna, and if you don't want things to get messy, break it off with Jemma. He nodded. I'm marrying Edna this weekend. Ben was satisfied with that answer and entered John's office. He stopped short in surprise. It wasn't just John. There were three other people in the room, his father, Lottie, and Patrick's wife, Jean. He ran over to Jean, kneeling next to her. Is Patrick okay? His mind was racing. Patrick had joined the army during the Great War, and letters between the two had been sparse. She started to cry. Ben wiped his eyes, struggling to find the next question. Before everyone's in tears, Patrick's alive, John said in a loud, clear voice. Now, everyone, we need to plan. He looked at Ben and said, You're integral to this. John, I'm still not sure, Ben's father started. John turned his gaze to him, his voice low and gravelly. Charles? Charles stopped. He understood the hierarchy in the room. He sat back down without further argument. John turned to Ben. Take a seat. Ben moved over to a chair near his father and waited. I had a request from Jeremy and Emma to help out in this situation, John told the four of them. And me, said Jean, wiping her tears. His face softened into a smile as he looked in her direction. Yes. Their families had been close since Patrick's aunt and uncle had saved Jemma and brought her home to them. When Jean married Patrick, she was included in his protection, whether they wanted it or not, he thought. Ben, we'll need you to accompany Jean overseas. To see Patrick? To bring him home, John replied. He continued to fill them in on the plan. That evening, as Ben packed his bag, he could see Charles standing in the open doorway. He seemed to be bracing himself for the upcoming conversation with his son. Ben didn't look up from his bag. He continued to roll up his shirts. It won't work, Dad. I'm going. Charles sighed and walked into the room. They're still fighting ongoing with Germany. I'm going, Ben repeated, his tone ending the topic. Then you'll need these. Charles walked over to him and held out a stack of tickets. You'll travel on the SS Kronlin from Hoboken, New Jersey. Ben turned to take them from him. The ship sounds familiar, he said, looking down at the various trains and ship tickets. It should. It was the ship that was struck by a torpedo. It was slightly damaged, recommissioned quickly, and was armed for defense during the war, and I think continues to be. It's now being used as a troop ship to get Army and Navy personnel home. Is it a military? It's a military ship? How were Jean and I able to get tickets? Your grandfather has contacts, Charles said simply. France? Asked Ben, looking at the tickets. Isn't Patrick in England? There's another ticket. You'll transfer there and continue to England. All of your transportation has been arranged to get you and Jean to Patrick. He put a hand on his son's shoulder. You don't have to do this. Ben slipped the tickets into his pocket and slammed his bag closed. He picked it up and said, Yes, I do. He's family. Chapter 3, England, 1918. Ben and Jean traveled by train and then by ship until they finally stood outside the hospital ward Patrick had been assigned to. A man leaning on crutches nearby asked, Are you here for someone in that ward? Yeah, Ben told him. Jean stayed silent, staring at those closed doors. Those guys were lucky to survive. They were at St. Mihiel. Ben looked at Jean. Her eyes were wide. They didn't know where Patrick had been hurt, but they had heard about the fighting at St. Mihiel. That was the site of the first independent American-led offensive break to the stalemate with Germany. St. Mihiel was a town surrounded by German soldiers. The mostly American unit caught the Germans in a withdrawal and were able to take advantage and push forward. There was a cost. 4,500 lives were lost there. Oh, Ben, Jean shuddered. Hey, it's okay, Ben told her. He made it through. We have to concentrate on that. She nodded, trying to fight back her tears. Ben looked at the man and asked, Is that where I lost my leg? You can ask. It's not a secret. He cracked a grin. No, I got run over by a jeep. Never got to see any action. The smile faded. I was lucky. He used the crutches to move away from them. Jean leaned on Ben's shoulders. Lucky? The man's lost a leg and he's lucky? Oh, Ben, why did he have to go? You know Patrick and Frank felt a strong obligation to defend our country, he said, hugging her close. And now Frank is missing and Patrick has come back injured. He is back with us. That is what we have to concentrate on. Ben, I'm scared. Patrick lost his hand. How do I react? They stared at the double doors. He held her hand tightly. It's Patrick. The hand doesn't matter. He hugged her close again and said, Do you need some time? I can go in first. No, I should. He's my husband. Let me. She nodded slowly and reluctantly moved to a chair across the hall and sat down. The trip and what was ahead of them were weighing on her mind. A nurse opened one of the doors, wearing a scarlet cape over a gray dress with white cuffs and a white muslin cap. She stepped out and said, You can come in. Ben looked over at Jean and she nodded. He turned to the nurse and said, After you. Won't she be coming into the ward? The nurse asked in a low voice. She just needs a minute. Then she should take it. She held the door, and he followed her, walking past men lying in beds, lined up side by side, 4 rows deep. The men were in various stages of treatment. Some had wrapped arms or legs, others had missing limbs. Ben saw nurses moving bed to bed, offering ministrations. The nurse he was following stopped and pointed to a bed a few feet from him. Ben grabbed a chair and dragged it over to sit next to the restless man in the hospital bed. He leaned over and asked, Can I tag along? The body stilled. His eyes popped open. Benji, you're here. I am. We've been sent to get you home. We? Does that mean? Patrick looked around wildly. It does. Ben started to explain. Patrick, I'm here, Jean said, coming up beside him. Patrick reached out with both his arms, forgetting the missing hand. Jean didn't care and went into his arms. Ben stepped back to give them their privacy. How are the kids? Patrick murmured. Lottie and your parents are with them, she said into his chest. Has Frank made it home? Frank was his best friend and his captain on the police force. She looked at Ben and then back at Patrick. He's missing. Missing? What does that mean? Not confirmed dead, Ben replied bluntly. Patrick nodded. There's still a chance then. Does Annabeth know? She's over here searching for him. I've sent notes to let her know we're here. Good. I want to help her any way we can, he said. He teared up again. God, I'm so happy to see you. A man in a white coat walked over to the bed, his head down. He stopped, looked up, and said, Should I come back? Patrick and Jean pulled apart, both wiping their eyes. Patrick spoke. No, please. Do you have it with you? What does he have in the box? Jean asked. Ben walked over to them and had the same question. My new hand, Patrick said, his voice matter of fact. Ben looked on with interest as the box was opened. It was indeed a hand made out of wood, with a place to slide onto Patrick's stump and a shoulder strap to fasten it. Did you make this for Patrick? Jean asked tentatively, reaching out to it. No, these are mass-produced now. We need these men to get back to normal life as fast as possible. The man took the hand out. All right, Patrick, sit up and slip out of your shirt. Patrick did as he was asked. He was so thin that his bones stood out. Jean stayed steady and didn't look away. This was her Patrick, and she'd be there for him no matter what. They watched as the prosthetic was fitted to Patrick's arm. Fit is good, but for now you'll have to wait to wear it for a few weeks. Patrick nodded and looked at the hand. It doesn't do much, he said. Not yet, but there are a lot of changes coming. I just say this is your first, not your last. After the man took some measurements, he told them, I'll make the changes and bring this back to you. Will the hand fit when Patrick gains weight? Asked Jean. Plan on fattening me up? Patrick teased her. I am. That is my number one goal. The man responded with, I will make the necessary changes. Thank you, said Patrick. Jean and Ben echoed him. The man put the hand back into its box. He walked to them. He nodded to them and walked away. A few moments later, a doctor walked up and Jean asked, When can we take him home? That's something we need to talk about, the doctor replied. And you are? I'm his wife, Jean, and this is Ben. We're Patrick's family. The doctor nodded. I'm Dr. Harris. Patrick can't be moved any time soon. It will be at least 6 months. Will you both stay? Patrick asked them. There was no hesitation. They said it at the same time. Of course we will. Patrick released the breath he didn't know he was holding. John had planned for this contingency and had set up a place for Jean and Ben to stay. He'd keep to his promise. Ben would be there as long as Patrick needed him. At the therapy session, working with his new hand a few months later, Jean and Ben sat watching the doctor and Patrick. Dr. Harris looked at Jean. Jean, I want to show you some exercises you can do with Patrick. Can you come with me? Is that okay? She asked Patrick. He nodded and smiled. He kept smiling until Jean left the room. Ben said, You can let go now. Patrick's smile dropped off his face. It hurts so much. He reached with his still intact hand to where the limb was no longer. You don't have to be brave for her. Tears welled up in Patrick's eyes. I don't know how else to act. Why not just be yourself? Asked Jean from the doorway. Patrick sniffed and tried to wipe his eyes. Ben stood. I think I need to give you guys both some time alone.